Hey everyone, so good to be back with you tonight in our small groups. Hey, we're hoping that next week or in the weeks coming up, we might be able to have small groups in person, outside, wherever that may be, whether that's in a backyard, a park, or even in the car park at church. And so I would love for you guys afterwards, after we've had our small group discussion, have a chat about where we could go if we move down levels next week and we can be outside in person, figure out where that is, let your leaders know to let me know as well. We just can't wait to see you again. We also know that a lot of you seniors are studying for exams coming up and all of the stress and anxiety that comes with that. So know that we are praying for you during this time. It's a busy time of the year. It's a weird time of the year as well, going back to school but with restrictions. So know that we are praying for you. We're also in our second week of our Bittersweet series. So we're going to play the bumper video and then I'll be back and we'll get into a message. Last week we talked about this idea of bittersweet. The idea that when someone hurts us or wrongs us, sometimes it can feel really sweet to hold onto that bitterness we have against them. We said that as good as it might feel at the time, there can actually be a better way. And that actually for us, the sweetest thing to do is to let go of that bitterness, to take those things that might have been done to us and to make something better come out of them. But of course, that's easier said than done. We can talk all day about how good this idea of forgiveness sounds, but when it comes to actually doing it, to forgiving someone, well, that seems to be a whole different story. Think about for you, what about the last time that someone did something to you or hurt you? Think about the time where something might have happened that was unfair. And the chances that we have experienced this kind of hurt or letdown with ourselves are pretty high. Sometimes we expect ourselves to act a certain way, or we expect to break a certain habit or get better at something. And then over and over again, we let ourselves down. We fail to meet our expectations. And when that happens, we tend to react in a number of different ways. We get frustrated, we get angry, we get distant, and we get even. But no matter how we react, the truth is the same. That because of the unfairness or the hurt, a relationship with someone can be broken or damaged. And you might find a small way to be rude or dismissive to them, like saying something like, "You do you," or telling people that that person is cancelled, or setting out a way to get revenge on them. And in a lot of ways, our reaction can often feel justified because we feel like, well, they were wrong to do what they did. And we're right to be as upset as we are. But it leaves us with the question, where do we go from here? If they were wrong and we were right, does that mean that we are justified in the way that we treat them? Does it mean that we're off the hook and we won't be held responsible for how we handle our relationship with them? Or does it mean that we get a free pass for some of our most hateful behavior because of what they did to us? In situations like this, sometimes this idea of forgiveness can seem weak and irresponsible and, well, straight up completely unfair. Sometimes forgiveness can feel like a cop-out. Paul wrote this letter to the church in Rome. And this letter, the book of Romans in the Bible, was written to these people who had just started following Jesus for the first time. These new believers found themselves surrounded by people who were as far away as being followers of Jesus as possible. And in fact, during this time, Christianity was fairly new. And Christianity was spreading fast. And these leaders in the city of Rome didn't see that growth as a good thing. They made these followers of Jesus a major target. And if you were living as one of those targeted group in one of the most violent cities in the world at the time, the chances are that you were probably feeling like things were unfair or unjust. You might have felt like these Roman leaders were the enemy and you were just some innocent citizen. That you were in the right and you should have the freedom to get even or mad or hold a grudge for how you were being mistreated. But we read in Romans that Paul doesn't actually give the Christians there a free pass to be bitter or angry. And in fact, he challenges them to turn their entire focus away from them. And he says, this isn't about the people who are persecuting you. This is about you. And here's what he writes. But God demonstrates his own love for us in this. While we were still sinners, Christ died for us. In other words, he's saying to them, maybe there's another way to look at the situation. We're no longer making a case for what is fair or unfair or just or unjust. Instead, we're talking about God's love for you. See, when you understand who God really is, it changes everything, even how you see forgiveness. The truth is that when we have gotten it all wrong, when we have done plenty to deserve punishment, when we didn't deserve it, well, God extended love to us. God didn't hold back. In fact, God has seen you and I at our very worst, and he didn't even flinch. But instead, he moved in our direction by sending us Jesus with no conditions attached. See, whether you're a teenager in the 21st century or whether you're living back in first century Rome, this temptation when we get wronged is to get caught up in what was done to us and what the other person deserves. And we often forget the very things that we get wrong ourselves. The temptation often is to look at the other person that wronged us, to dismiss them, to move focus from ourselves and onto our wrongs and our wrongs to theirs. But Paul in this letter is saying, God has looked at what you have done, and he didn't dismiss you, but instead he loved you and then dismissed your sins. In other words, God didn't cancel us. God cancelled our wrongs. You see, here's the thing. When we start to realize how God forgives our wrongs against him and chooses to love us no matter what, then we have to ask ourselves, well, what does that mean for others who have hurt or treated us unfairly? And Paul answers that question for us in his letter to the church in Colossae. And Paul said this in Colossians. He said, bear with each other and forgive one another. For if any of you has a grievance against someone, forgive as the Lord forgave you. It's this picture of carrying a weight of each other's burdens, carrying each other's imperfections together. It's a picture of patient commitment to seeing each other as human instead of villains, even when it's super challenging to do. All because of what God has done for us. All because God extended his love and forgiveness to us with no strings attached, with no conditions, with nothing held back. But here's what it doesn't mean. It doesn't mean that we treat others for what was done to us, or we see it as no big deal. You see, Paul isn't downplaying the root of the problem, nor is Paul excusing the wrong we did or the wrong against us. Instead, Paul is saying whatever was done to you, however unfair it was, that was a real and a big thing. But just as God looks at you and the mistakes that you have made, he sees more than just the stuff we've done wrong. In the same way, we need to see the people that we might have treated as unfairly and treat them as more than just the thing that they did wrong to. You see, God sets the standard here, and it's God's forgiveness that tells us exactly how we should see ourselves and see others. You could say it this way: cancel the debt, not the person. And when we do that, we remember that people are more than their mistakes. We remember that there is more to the story than just people's wrongdoings and what they've done wrong. We do that remembering that God hasn't held our wrongs against us, and we shouldn't do it to others either. You see, for everyone, forgiveness is a challenge. Forgiveness doesn't often come naturally, and it probably will never be easy. In fact, it often feels easier to cancel a person rather than canceling what they've done wrong. But this whole idea of forgiveness is something that we should do because God has done it for us. You see, that's why we have small groups. Because as challenging as forgiveness is, it would be so much harder to do it alone. But you've got your small group as a source of encouragement and strength. This reminder that you aren't doing things alone, that you're not trying to make forgiveness this reality by yourself. And I encourage you to count on and lean on others in your small group as you figure out who in your life needs to be forgiven and how to make this kind of forgiveness a reality in your life. Because remember, forgiveness is the best thing that you can do when the worst stuff happens to you.